Hi, Daniel. Just finished reading the script and I knew from even just the title. It's funny because a lot of screenwriters, they don't realize the importance of the title. I knew from just the title I was going to get in a highly evocative work, that there was going to be strong emotions and something going on. So I love that even from the title, I'm already getting a sense that this is going to be a profound story. So I was already looking forward to that. And I absolutely love the superpower that you have. And I want to make sure you understand the superpower that you have. You have a very cinematic way of taking the small little things and making them so monumental. It's like 1 + 1 = 5. It's those little delicate little moments of just a tear going down a face, or the imagery of the balloons, so much symbolism, so many profound moments that are done so subtly and eloquently. And I call it lyrical or poetic. I don't know if you have a background in music, but for me, it's those little tiny moments that speak so much with so little. Because usually people, when they're screenwriting, they want to just, throw these big things in there like a car chase and explosions or whatever, thinking that you have to be big in a screenplay. And because that camera can go so close, I mean, it can zoom into a molecule or an atom, we can have such subtle little things be huge on the big screen. And so I loved in these moments where we had these little subtle moments, like the tear rolling down her face just at a pivotal moment, or the pink balloon and how that played out later on. So I love this gorgeous, cinematic, poetic storytelling. And I feel like because I know you can nail those moments, I feel like the trick is to get everything else up to that level, because those are singing, they're magnificent, they're awesome. I also love that this is dealing with someone who's homeless and having mental issues. I find that very timely. At first, when I saw, and there's some other things I like too, when I first saw, okay, this is going to be about Vietnam, that's a subject matter that has been kind of looked at from so many different angles. I was curious as to how this was going to be something different, and it was something different to have almost a fantastic Vietnam story. I thought that was incredibly interesting. But just the fact that right now the homeless problem is so huge right now, and to have a very sympathetic view of the homeless and kind of put ourselves in their shoes, that makes this really timely. So love that. So there's a lot going on here that is gorgeous and poetic and lyrical. So trying to get everything in there up to the level of the moments that are just nailing it and are in the pocket. A little phrase that I got from a music seminar I was at for some reason, and this musician, the music executive, was listening to the song, and he was like, yeah, it was in the pocket and then it fell out of the pocket, then it got back in the pocket. So it's about raising everything up to the level of when it's absolutely ringing bells and hitting the heights and nailing what exactly I think you want to hit with this, those highly evocative cinematic moments. So I'll talk later about how I think you could. Oh, and I love the twist in the end, because I did not see that coming. I did not see Lily being real. And usually it's so easy to see twists, and it's so hard to pull off twists. I mean, since The Sixth Sense, everybody's trying to come up with some kind of twist ending. So we've seen everything under the sun. But somehow the way you set it up, I did not see that coming at all. And I thought that was incredible to have that at the end. That was gorgeous. So I'll talk a little bit later about how I think the whole thing could be kind of rearranged, not necessarily in the chronological order of how things happen, but just in the order or point of view of how the exact same story is told to maximize the storytelling. But before we get into that, there's kind of, I think, one main thing that I think needs to be addressed and looked at first before kind of tweaking the order at which we maximize the narrative. For me, the main thing that I want to look at, and this is the trick, you're coming at this a little newer. And the trick for screenwriters is I can tell you feel every moment, you see every moment. You would probably be a brilliant director because you know exactly what you see on screen, exactly what it should feel like. I'm sure you see the exact framing, everything. You had Sam doing art. I wouldn't be surprised if you have some kind of an art background. So you're seeing everything. And the trick is, because we have this film in our mind and then we're writing this script, what we're trying to do is paint the exact same movie, the same film in the reader's mind. And because this world is so vivid to us, and because we know these characters almost better than we know ourselves, sometimes things are lost that the audience doesn't have that we have because we spent more time with these characters. We've thought about their whole life. We walk around in their shoes, we think about them, we see them, we feel them. So for me, there was a little bit missing from Sam, and I think some questions that need to be answered about him. In the very beginning, I didn't get a strong sense of kind of who he is. And I hesitate to grab standard screenplay, whatever, but most of the time in basic screenplay story structure, they'll always talk about the lead having a goal. And you don't necessarily always have to have a lead with a really strong goal. One of my favorite movies is Napoleon Dynamite, and he's just kind of walking around dealing with chapstick and suits and other things, and he doesn't necessarily have a big goal pushing him through. But in this particular case, I didn't really know who Sam was. He was just kind of, for me, kind of a guy, and he was kind of there, but I didn't have a strong sense of what he wanted in life to really have me understand what kind of guy this is. And I know you took the beginning screenwriting class, and in there I put the archetypes that are from my favorite character book, The Complete Guide to Heroes and Heroines. I would suggest that you sit down with those archetypes and just ask yourself, who is Sam? Is he kind of like a rebel bad boy? Is he like a swashbuckler? Is he like a professor? Is he an artist? Is he a dreamer? I couldn't figure out who he was and what he wanted. We see him running with his dog, which maybe he's somebody who doesn't take life seriously and is just playing all the time and doesn't work hard. I don't know. And then Claire saves him, which is not him being active. If Claire fell in the water and he had to save her, then maybe he's a take charge, get things done kind of guy. But when Claire actually has to save him, and then he starts to go out with her, and that's kind of easy. And then a little later, Claire kind of takes charge and starts to tell him what to do. And he kind of just did what she said. And very quickly for me, he became very passive. He was just watching things and feeling things and didn't really take action. And other people were telling him what to do and he was doing it. So I'm just going to try to give you the picture that I got in my mind as I was reading it, because I'm assuming it's not exactly what you intended when you think of Sam. But for me, he was incredibly passive and he was thoughtful. He was absolutely thoughtful. He was considerate. He was kind, but he came off a little wimpy. And the trouble with that is, even though you're not necessarily worried about having some super duper Hollywood career, I assume you want to get this made. And in order to get this made, you've got to attract an actor to play the role. The bigger the name, the better, because you need to get it financed. And usually they get it financed by first getting an actor in it that's financeable and then getting it financed. So you kind of have to look at this through the lens of an actor. Do they want to play Sam? Do they want to be seen as that kind of a person? If you go through the script, I want you to open up the script and I want you to go to the find button and I want you to find these words: tremble, trembling, worry, panic, crying. And there's like one other one too. He seems to always be really scared, trembling, crying, afraid. He's not really a role that an actor would be dying to play. That isn't to say that every actor wants to play Rambo, where he has no feelings and runs around with a machine gun and mows everybody down, but they usually want to have some gifts, and they usually don't at least want to be kind of wimpy or just hiding all the time or just standing there watching. As an actor, they want to be able to act, so they want to be doing something. So in far too many scenes, Sam was just kind of there watching what was going on, or someone tells him what to do and then he does it, which doesn't give him much to act. And for me, this isn't necessarily just an acting problem, that it's going to be trouble finding an actor to play this role, because there isn't necessarily a lot for him to do because he's often passively watching something. But it just harkens to another issue with the character, that we as the audience, I found myself sometimes having a hard time liking Sam, because sometimes he was so much trembling and scared and panicked. I kind of wanted to slap him and say, "Man up." I can't imagine being a POW, and I'm sure what he went through is horrible. And I'm sure even before that was horrible, but even I kind of felt like, dude, come on, man up a little bit, because he just seemed to fall apart so easily. And then also, when he was in basic training, the other characters were so much more flamboyant and funny and punchy and saying things. He kind of fell into the shadows, and he was just kind of standing there watching them. And then the very first thing he does when he gets to Nam is he trips and falls and bangs his head, and then he's in the hospital. So it's like he's clumsy. And then later on, he falls down a lot. And that's another problem for me too, is not only is he seem very passive and then very wimpy, he's also kind of a klutz, to the point where if I was a guy and I had, like a team of army guys, like I would campaign to keep him off my team, because he's going to get somebody killed, because he's kind of a klutz and he's super wimpy and scared. And I want guys who are not wimpy and not scared and not klutzy. So he falls down and hits his head and goes to the hospital. Then later, he and his two buddies again fall, and that's why they don't get killed, because they fell again. Then they get captured. Then he's just passively watching his buddies strongly resist. His buddies were mouthing off and being brave and being strong, and he's just watching. And then he's just passively taking the treatment they're giving him, and he's not actively trying to find a way out, or trying to get information. He doesn't really have a goal. He's not doing anything. And then when he does escape, it's by accident. It's not because he did something smart, or he did something brave, or he outwitted them, or he came up with a plan. He just gets lucky and then gets out. So then when he kind of starts to go super crazy and he starts to get really weird, when I already kind of didn't like him before that, it was hard for me to really continue to root for him when now he's really kind of gone a little bonkers. So I think you've got to make a decision about who he is and give him some strengths and special talents to make him interesting, whether he's funny or, he started to do art at the end. If he's an artist and that's what he is, then give him that special skill throughout. He should be doing that in the beginning. And maybe that's the way he wins over Claire, where he's just, maybe he's just staring at her and she's looking at him. And then he goes up to her and says, "Hey, would you like to go out?" And she says, "No," and stop staring at me. And then maybe he leaves behind a picture he drew of her, and she realizes he wasn't staring at her just to stare at her. He was drawing the picture of her. And then maybe that wins her over. That would have more to do with who he is. When he just falls in somewhere and almost drowns and she has to save him, that does set up this he's a klutz that constantly needs saving. But if he's a klutz who constantly needs saving, it's really hard for us to root for him and like him, and hard for an actor to want to play that role. So I just really take a hard look at Sam and determine who is he? What is he about? What does he want out of life? What archetype would he fit into to really understand who he is, make him a little less klutzy? And the more you can put us in his shoes, where we could totally understand what he's doing because we in that situation would do the same thing, the more that we will like him. So be very careful about making him hopeless. Somewhere in the script it said he was losing all hope. If he loses hope, it's real hard for us to root for him to succeed more than he's rooting for himself. So be real careful about hopelessness. And then he's got to be a little more active when he's in the POW camp, even if it's he takes some sand and makes some kind of magnificent sand painting out of all these different colors of sand because he's an artist. I wanted to see, I think you've got room for it in the script too. And I'm going to talk about other things that could come out of the script. And if those things come out, you've got more room to take what you have and go deeper. I kind of want to see him have some kind of an evolution or a relationship with one of the guards. For me, they seemed a little too I don't know. I just want to go deeper into their characters. When we have a movie and we're talking about people and their lives and their relationships, this is the time to not just have them be just kind of generic, bad guys who like to torture, but to give it a little more humanity. And that helps ground it a little bit more too and make it even more realistic and even make it a little more shaded, because when they were so supremely evil and bad, which I'm sure they could have been that way in the POW camp, because I'm not a POW camp expert, but just to shade it a little bit, if he even has just a little bit of a relationship with his main guard or something, I think that would help. And then just have him break out because of his own ingenuity. Maybe he does make the beautiful sand painting and he gets them to, somehow he gets them to ask him to paint something in their building, or he gets asked to do a portrait of one of the guys. And when it almost like, here I love to bring in this movie a lot, but the Shawshank Redemption, when Andy, you can compare it to this. Andy's in prison, but he starts to get out more and more because he has these skills. He's smart. So he is an accountant. He starts to get out of the prison to help all the inmates do their taxes. And then the warden starts to realize his assets and have him do the taxes. So he gets more and more power because of what he can do, even though he's in prison. So if Sam is an amazing artist, which if you want to make him a more sensitive type, that would make him us understand why he's not Rambo, but still keep him more likable because he's got skills and talents. If he is making these really amazing, maybe sand paintings using different colors of sand. I can't remember the Tibetan monk order that does these. They spend, days, months, years making these intricate sand paintings with different colored sand, and then they just blow them away. Well, if he was making these intricate sand paintings, and maybe they could be something that represented his old life, maybe it's a picture of Claire, something. If the head honcho of the enemy sees these paintings and has him come in and they start to have him do portraits of them or something, or have him paint their barracks or something where he starts to get a little more power, then he could start to plot his escape or something like that, so that when he does escape, it was because he was smart and talented and not just because he got lucky one day and somebody did an accident and he got out. Even though I did like that the younger guard was immediately shot for that mistake, I liked that, and that's probably 100% true. The number one thing is I think we've really got to keep Sam likable and have an actor want to play that role. So he just has to be less wimpy, less timid, less nervous, less panicked, less klutzy, falling down and bonking his head, so that later on we don't feel like, wow, he's really weird and I don't like him and I don't get him. We really want to love him and be in his shoes. I feel like I really didn't know much about him before Vietnam, except for he just did what he was told and he had to be saved by his girlfriend. So we really need to understand Sam to be more in his shoes. So now, because I mentioned that and talking about in his shoes, now I'm going to go back to what I wanted to talk about before, which is kind of changing how the exact same story is told to help us get more in his shoes. The first thing I want to bring up is the voiceover in the beginning. I talk in the page notes a little bit when you cast the role with people and you put in the parentheses Freeman. That is not done at all. It's kind of a faux pas to put who you would cast in the role in the script, because it's kind of a little bit of a rookie amateur thing that they do. So it's not done. And the reason it's not done is because, for one, when these scripts go out, you can't change the name 15 times for the 5 different or the 10 different cast people that they would want it to go out to. So if this script is going to go out wide, it's going to go to all these different production companies, and then they might want to send it out to different actors, and you can't constantly keep changing the script to say that actor's name, because no actor is going to want to read a script and be offered a role that they can tell they were not first choice. So you don't want the script going out with Freeman in brackets, and they're giving the role to, I don't know, I'm making it up, William Shatner. He's the worst casting for that possible. Or Jack Nicholson. Let's say it's going to Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson, they know he's not even going to read it because he can tell from the script he was not the first choice. So you just don't put that in there, because unless it is going to the exact actor and all those actors only that you're saying they're going to find out they were second choice and they're high prima donnas, and they'll get pissy and they'll say no just because of that. So that's one of the reasons it's not done. The other reason is we should be able to tell from what the character says and what they do just exactly what kind of character that is. If we have to cheat by casting it to help give it flavor, then that means the story doesn't have enough flavor, because we say that characters should jump off the page. They should just feel like living, breathing people. And if they don't, and we have to tell the reader who we would cast in the role because they're really not feeling the character, it's kind of making up for something that's missing. So we don't want to put characters in brackets, but just starting with the doctor in the beginning. That, for me, that scene in the very beginning didn't really work for you on a couple different levels. For one, you're putting us instantly in the point of view of this doctor, and it's really not his story. I'd rather start in the point of view of Sam and his shoes. And then also that particular little teasers or little things in the beginning of a story really work when they are a teaser. They bring up a mystery, or they bring up a conflict, or they show a dead body and you're like, oh my God, how did that person die? And for me, when we basically just have the doctor saying, yeah, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I will anyway. It really wasn't, it didn't have me on the edge of my seat going, oh my gosh, what's he's going to say? This is going to be amazing. It was kind of like, oh, okay, he should probably say this. So it wasn't, and there was no conflict in the scene. There was no urgency in the scene. And so I think there are other places in your story that are far more interesting that you could start with, that would help you also tell the story, help us stay in the shoes of Sam. If I were you, and there's no answers in the back of the book, there's 15,000 ways to tell the story. So I'm not saying this is the exact right way to tell your story. But one way I would suggest that you could tell the story, one place where you have high conflict, high drama, is when he is a POW. So if you started the script him as a POW right then, it's almost like, I'm going to go back to the Shawshank Redemption. We get a little tiny prologue of Andy's life before he comes into prison, and then we pretty much start the movie him coming to prison, and we go from there. If you start the whole movie as either right before he's captured and he's captured, that's super exciting and gets us into the movie and is high conflict, high drama, and starts us with a bang. Or if you start him in the POW camp when some of the stuff is happening, we instantly have conflict, we have drama, we see Sam being brutalized, we instantly understand his situation. And then from there, with that framework, you can go back in time and then start to tell all the stories of how he got there. And you can also then leave out some of the little tiny stuff that I didn't think we necessarily needed as we were going in chronological order. I thought we get a little too much of he and Claire falling in love. The setup seemed a little long. So then we can very much shortcut. And you can also tell the story out of order if you want to. You could go back to whatever part you wanted to. And then something else I would suggest, and again, this is not the answers in the back of the book because there are no answers in the back of the book. I loved the twist of Lily in the end. But what I would kind of love even more, I know you had those, point of view of reality to show that he's a nut job. I kind of didn't want to feel like he was a nut job. I kind of didn't want to be looking at him like, wow, he's really out there. I kind of wanted to be in his shoes so that later on, when it turned out to be not reality, it would be just as jarring for him as me. So I kind of wanted him to find out later, like to him to find out that he was just imagining things and have it proven to him, and he's a little thrown the same way, and I'm in his shoes. I didn't realize everything he was imagining wasn't true, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, that wasn't true. I'm shocked. And so then I would more understand him because I went through the same journey with him. And even though I loved the really fantastic elements of, say, the tiger and the elephant and going to Mars, there's a couple different ways you could go with it. One of it is to really crank it up to that level. But if you're going to crank it up to that level of going to Mars and an elephant and all this, you almost have to introduce that level of fantasy in the very beginning because it kind of comes in so late in the story. It's a tonal shift and a genre shift. So we either have to start out that kind of trippy in the beginning, at least little hints of it, and it's that trippy throughout. Or you might even pull it down a little bit and ground it a little bit more because the beginning was quite grounded and then it kind of went a little off the deep end at the end. So something I might suggest is if you still have Lily be with the balloon and he sees her and that's why he tumbles down the hill and his buddies are captured, if later on she's introduced maybe through some bars on the side of his cage or something, and he comes over and Lily could 100% be real. Like she introduces herself as you know my dad is here hostage, or my grandfather's here hostage, or something that could maybe clue us that later on when it's revealed that she is more than likely his granddaughter, or semi related to him, or related through Claire at least. I think that if she says, she comes over and she's dirty and she says, they're holding my grandfather here, and if he could talk to her as if she's absolutely real, and they have this little conversation, and we believe she is real because she could run away the second the enemy comes or something, and they could talk. And if she started to have more in-depth conversations with him. So if he had to explain to her how he got there, if she says, how did you get here? And he has to go back and tell his story of how he fell in love, or, if he says, I really want to go home. And she says, why do you want to go home? And then he can start to talk about Claire. And that's when we would flash back to how he met Claire. And, maybe he would do the little sand drawings for her. Maybe he would, there's a piece of cardboard on the ground or something, and he uses the sand to make a little sand painting for her, and she takes it and leaves with it or something, or he says, you can mess it up. She says, no, it's pretty. He says, no, it's meant to be messed up, or something where this very grounded relationship starts to happen between the two of them, where I believe she's real, and maybe we think, maybe she's being held hostage. Maybe there's a family or something somewhere else being held hostage, something where she could be a little more real, so that later on it is a surprise to us to find out she's not real, because that surprise is kind of ruined very quickly when we're constantly seeing reality and then seeing what he sees. And when we do that, we can tell we're not in his shoes. We're looking at him going, oh, he's really gone off the deep end. Wow, he's really lost it, as opposed to experiencing it with him. So you might play with that, play with starting the story either when he's getting captured, the beginning of that, like he's in the woods and gets captured, and then starts to talk to her, and then flashbacks, and then we get the beginning in the framework of him being a POW, and then later when he gets out, we have that. And then either play with Lily being fantastic and the world of the story being fantastic from the very beginning, or ground her a little bit more where we almost think she could be, real. We don't realize she's a figment of the imagination. And so we're more in his shoes and he doesn't seem so crazy to us. And then we like him a little bit more. So I play with that. And then, what else was I just gonna say? We would still not see the twist from a while away. And then, um, also as far as that first doctor appointment scene, again, it didn't have conflict for me. It didn't have stakes. It didn't have urgency. The doctor isn't a main character, so I kind of thought it was wasted space to get him in there. And I also don't necessarily think you needed that doctor in there at all. Going to the end when he chases Lily and then he dies and he sees the balloon going up. I thought that was gorgeous and wonderful, and I loved that. And then we just got the information that the mom is named Samantha, and we know that's her daughter. To me, it was drop the mic, walk away. You did it. That's gorgeous. And all that extra going to the doctor, hearing the story, learning his backstory, her, all the explanation, her talking about, oh my gosh, that looks just like my daughter. I thought all that was overkill. I felt like you nailed it. It just needed to drop the mic and move on. So for me, all the stuff with the doctor was just like over explaining the situation when we got everything, when we just found out her name is Samantha and that's her daughter Lily. And then maybe in one of the pictures that he has, maybe he has the lock, the compass from JJ, and then maybe she has the same compass. Boom, the audience instantly knows what's going on, and we don't need characters talking about it like, oh, that's amazing that she looks like her. Oh, look, that dress looks the same. And then the doctor saying, oh, let me tell you the whole story. It's like that to me was all overkill. You nailed it, nailed it, nailed it. Drop the mic and walk away because it was there. So I didn't think the doctor really added anything to it. I thought it just made it more confusing. And the voiceovers throughout the story for me were so infrequent. They were jarring. It's like all of a sudden we got a voiceover and it's like, oh, that's right, I forgot about him. And it was kind of jarring. And then also for me, the doctor was plugging a hole that I think needs to be filled. And that is, again, the character of Sam tended to be very passive and he would just feel things instead of doing things. So for me, the doctor was a trick where he just kind of came in and told us what he was feeling because that's what was going on in the scene at the moment. Is he was feeling things, and that's not enough. He needs to be doing things. He needs to be active and less passive. Something else, another note that I put, I loved the idea of Lily being kind of a coping mechanism, but then at the end when she turns out to be real, then it's almost making the script a little more magical that, we're all spirits and maybe we all exist throughout time. Oh, and then the doctor's really, really long speech at the end. Again, I think you do such a beautiful job of nailing things in the silent, subtle, visual, poetic way that was almost the opposite of your superpower. It was like the super over explaining of everything, whereas you just nail it with those gorgeous visuals and poetic moments. So again, the doctor just kind of didn't work for me on any level. I thought it distracted from what you're doing. It was over explaining. It was coming in and saying, here's how Sam feels right now, because Sam is really just kind of watching things and feeling. And so it was a little bit of a problem. But I loved the idea that Lily is a coping mechanism and she comes and goes. So if you played with starting us either right before he gets captured and he gets captured, which is a super exciting opening to see him get captured. He's in Vietnam and gets captured. And then he's in the POW camp and being tortured. And Lily starts to slowly show up as his coping mechanism, or we don't even know, is it the spirit of his grandchild that he's connecting with? Because we're all spiritual beings in physical bodies. So I love that kind of we don't know in the end kind of moment. I love that. But then when he's rescued, or I want him to not necessarily be rescued, because again, he was rescued in the end. He kept needing to be rescued all the time. So even when he gets out, not of his own devices, he finds the key, and so he gets lucky, and then the US soldiers come and save him. So again, Claire saved him in the beginning, he gets saved at the end. He doesn't do enough to help himself. I want him to save himself at the end. He's smart enough to get out, and maybe he thinks he's going to get out because he wants to go save Lily. maybe that's something. He wants to go save her. She says, my grandfather's here hostage and I can't get out either, or something. And he wants to save her. And that's why he wants to get out. Because that would make us like him even more if maybe at first he thinks there's no way out, but then he wants to get her out or something like that. Okay, so that's a whole bunch of bigger picture kind of notes. So mainly really, really take a hard look at Sam. Make him a role that an actor would love to play. That does not mean he has to be Rambo. He could be a sensitive artist, but make him talented, make him smart, make him save himself more, make him not so scared, trembling, panicking, worried, wimpy. Just make him have a little more hope and be a little more talented and really help us understand who and what he is, because I just didn't understand him. So if you start in Vietnam, then we'll get to know him through the flashbacks, what kind of guy he is, and have him be more active in the flashback scenes. Claire saved him, and then Claire was telling him what to do, and he was just being worried and telling her that he was going to be okay. So, and then another thing I would say is going through trying to find more conflict in scenes. A lot of the times characters were worried about things, but they didn't really have conflict. So one instance that's coming to my mind right now of a scene that I thought didn't have conflict, it would be very easy to make conflict. If you do a flashback and you show when he proposed to Claire, right now that scene is them passively getting information about the draft, passively worrying about the draft, being upset about the draft. So there's a lot of emotion, worry, but there's really no conflict or drama or urgency or anything like that. So an example of how something like that could be painted a different way. So if the moment he finds out he's drafted, she starts crying and he gets down on one knee and says, "Will you marry me?" The last thing in screenwriting you want is the most obvious thing to happen, the thing that everyone would expect to have happen. So you always want to thwart audience expectation. So if he got down on one knee and said, "Will you marry me?" And if she got mad at him, how dare you? How dare you? You're just going to go over there and die and leave me mourning you for the rest of my life. You're going to have me missing you all the time. How dare you ask me to marry you and put me through that? Hell no. And then if he's completely upset that he's lost her, if he's in line to go sign up for the draft, and then maybe she drives by somewhere and she's peeking over a fence and she's calling him over like, "I'm sorry. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry you." And then he's got to somehow fight his way out of line. Like, the guy's like, "Hey, I let me have a leave for a second. I got to go marry my girl." "No, you're not allowed." And he's got to fight his way into that situation. He's like, "No, you're being called next. Your number's up now. You leave, you're going to be called AWOL. We're going to arrest you," whatever. Because that's conflict, that's drama, that's urgency. He's got to go marry her right now. This is the last chance or he'll never see her again. So he's got to find some sneaky way to get out of line and rushed over to the courthouse to marry her before he gets back. And so if there's this moment where she's, he says, "Will you marry me?" And she says, "Absolutely not. How dare." Maybe she even slaps him, maybe even like starts throwing things at him, like what we would not expect, and conflict. And then later says, I'm sorry, I want to marry you. And he's got to find his way to get permission to get out of line, to run to the courthouse and marry her and not be considered AWOL and stuck in prison, and then go to Vietnam. So that's a way to put conflict into "Will you marry me?" as opposed to "Yes, yes," crying tears, happy, happy, joy, joy. So try to get more conflict in the scenes if you can, throughout the scenes, and have him have to do more to make him more active. So now I'm going to get into a couple of little page notes. Page 1, I already said this. I don't think there's any reason for the doctor in the beginning. I think just adds a layer of complexity to the story that I don't think really works. Cut all the music cues, because when readers are reading scripts, they can't hear music. So just looking at a cue, if somehow a CD came with the script, they could turn it on and play it, but they can't. So it's just extra stuff that's in the way that slows down the read. So it's another like kind of a newbie mistake to put music in there. Everybody wants to do it, but you shouldn't. So pull out the music. Something else that I find that we need more in the script, that if you rearrange it and start him either being captured and put into the POW camp or start him in the POW camp, there's something called a central question. I'm sure I talked about this in the beginning screenwriting class, where like Die Hard, the question is he going to, beat the terrorists? In E.T., is E.T. going to get home? In The Wizard of Oz, is Dorothy going to get home? For me, the way the story is now, it's kind of wandering around. And, first it has a lot to do with Claire. Is this about he and Claire? Is this a romance about their love when she isn't even around in the second half? Then it's jarring. And so it's like it starts out at one type of script. It's a drama about family and he and Claire. And then all of a sudden it's a POW, very serious, very graphic movie. And then suddenly in this third half, it's a fantasy, and it keeps kind of changing gears in a way that's a little jarring. And we don't really have a central question. If you started this with him becoming captured and then he's trying to get out of the POW camp or in the POW camp, then you would have a central question, a spine to hold the whole story together. And that is, will he get out? So I really felt the lack of a central question. Then I already kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I have this note here. Another problem that I had with Sam, not just that I didn't understand it, but his character almost felt a little too one note. It seemed like almost every scene he's trembling, panicking, worrying, scared, afraid. So be careful that he's just kind of not the same all the time. I also want to see evolving relationships. So kind of taking a big step back and deciding what is the point of the story. I love the twist in the end. So if a little bit of the story is maybe how we're all interconnected and maybe how there is no such thing as time or space and we're all existing at the same time, some of us in physical form, some of us not in physical form. And when you're a POW, one thing that might kind of be on your mind is, wow, is there a God? Because if there is a God, fuck him, right? That I'm a POW. So something that an idea you could introduce into the story is, if you've got this POW who's facing the worst torture, the worst life anyone could imagine, if ever there is like a crisis of faith moment that you would have, it would be when you are a POW. So then that could bring in ideas of, why are we on this planet? Who is God? How can he let this happen? And if the idea is, we're all one and we're all interconnected and time exists at all time exists all at once. And once time is gone, it's kind of gone. And what happens in the spiritual realm is more important than the physical. That could be a way to wrap our heads around how something so bad can happen. So I think that deserves some examination, and you got a little bit into that in the super talky doctory thing at the end, but I think it needs to come in there a little earlier, maybe with Sam wondering, maybe if he gets a cellmate and the cellmate can be the voice of this question, where it's like, fuck God, man, how could he let me get here? God doesn't exist. You hear that, God? Fuck you. And if he and Sam can have this discussion about, maybe what's keeping Sam alive, or maybe Sam's about ready to give up, and the cellmate, they talk about, it's kind of the same as those books that have been written, by people in concentration camps. How do you wrap your head around why bad things happen to good people? And so I think you have some real opportunity to address that in a really amazing way. And in keeping with that, I want to see some evolving relationships with Sam. It seems like people are kind of revolving doors in his life. So we get him and Claire, and then that's kind of done. And then him and Willie and Bo, and then that's gone. And then he and Lily, and then that disappears. And it's more like there's this constant changing cast of characters that comes and goes in his life, instead of seeing some evolution of relationships. And that's also why I was thinking you might bring into one of the guards he starts to have a little bit of a relationship with, maybe even has this discussion with the guard, or the guard asks him, How maybe he still prays or something, and the guard asks him, how can you still believe in God when we're doing this to you? And maybe it can kind of freak the guard out that he still maintains faith while he's in there or something. So I think you have room to do with that. And I think I'd like to see more character evolutions, which means kind of sticking with more the same characters in the beginning and having them throughout, as opposed to, Claire comes and then she's gone. And then Willie and Bo come and then they're gone. And then Lily comes and then she's gone. And then the doctor comes and then he's gone. Where we don't get more evolution of characters, we get episodes of characters. I kind of wanted a little bit more about what Lily represents. It might be in there. This is not a big thing at all, but I think it harkens back to deciding, could it be that she is, a little piece of spirit of him that, is alive, and he's kind of channeling why he's a POW or something like that. But then also, I talked about he did what Claire told him to do in the very beginning. Then it just seemed to be that he did what Lily told him to do. So I didn't understand, if Lily's a figment of his imagination, what aspect of his psyche does she represent? Is she the take charge version and he's the passive wimpy version? Or if Lily is the spirit of his granddaughter that he's connecting with when he's in this POW camp, and he's kind of maybe disconnecting from reality and more connecting with spirit, if she really is his granddaughter. So the two of them became a little one note. She was telling him what to do and he was following. So if she is a figment of imagination, I don't know what figment of his psyche she represents, if she's his hope or something. So that felt a little strange. And then again, watch her telling him what to do all the time, and he just does what she says. I loved the idea of the dominoes in the beginning, because we've got this, all these things kind of happen, and how life, like a pool table, balls hitting each other and things happen. But because nobody in the script plays dominoes, and because I think the doctor's office distract from what you're doing, maybe find a different way to put the dominoes in there, because I did like the visual of the dominoes, but maybe if there's some other way to get them in there, whether Sam's carving dominoes with a rock or something, or he's been given some dominoes, that's the only thing he can play with, or maybe the big honcho of the camp has him come play dominoes every night because he says everyone else is too stupid to play. That would also make Sam seem smarter, if the big head baddie says he's the best, nobody else is as good as him. That makes us like Sam more because he's good at something. And if he's allowed to take them and sets them up, something. But I would find some other way to put them in there. And then I kind of already talked about how the doctor kind of doesn't work for me. Another reason is, you really want to grab us in the beginning and pull us into the story where we can't stop reading and we're hooked. When the first moments of the story was just him looking out a window and having some feelings flash across his face, I didn't quite know what to feel. We don't really quite know what to make of that. And then when he's leading with, yeah, there's something I probably shouldn't tell you, but I'll go ahead and tell you, just not really grabbing us. But especially when our first moment is of a doctor and we're not really sure what to think of him with the look on his face. And I know what you're doing. I know how you're setting up mystery, and I know now with the end. But again, I just think there's other ways to set up the mystery and other ways to suck us in. I do think starting it either with him being captured as a POW or already in the POW camp would be stronger. Probably get him getting captured into the POW camp because that was really the start of his downward spiral. And then we would get from there, he would start to flash back and tell stories of his backstory and how he got there. Let's see. Dialogue needs a trim. Man, I've been doing this for a long time. I like what I do. I take my responsibilities very seriously. Just looking at that scene, looking at the dialogue, I found often characters kind of danced around things and had very formal ways of speaking and treaded very lightly instead of just kind of coming out and saying it. So even though I don't like the doctor scene, because I don't think it really helps you accomplish the maximum that I know the script can go to, something like the man just saying something like, I refuse, or saying something a little stronger that would give us stakes or conflict, saying something like, I could lose my job for what I'm about to tell you. Or even more stronger than that, because you really want to kind of grab people with the dialogue too. If he says something like, I'm going to die, and we all go, what? Not today, but someday, and I can't go to the grave, without saying what I have to say, even though I might lose my job if I say it. So it's like he kind of grabbed us with saying, I'm going to die. Woo, what? And then he says, well, not now, but later in the future. And then we know he's going to risk his job, his profession, to say what he's saying. So that's some stakes. So with the dialogue, be careful about it being a little too dancy around the subject, and kind of give us a little more punch and give us a little more stakes and drama. Something else I noticed in drama or in dialogue a lot, characters tended to repeat themselves, either in the same line, they'd say the same sentence all over again, or sometimes they'd say one sentence and then a couple action lines later they would repeat the same sentence. So like Claire says what the hell, and then what the hell later on somebody else says one line, then says the exact same line. Or characters will say something like, please don't say anything, I'm sorry, no really, please don't say a word, I'm so sorry, like say the same thing over and over again. So just go through the dialogue and look for that, because that sogifies the dialogue and makes it a little weaker. So something to look for. Page 2, after reading the opening, no reason not to name the man. So as far as when you were concerned about naming the character in that beginning scene, there was no reason not to name him. So I would go ahead and give his character a name. Page 2, snippet of Sam in jungle. We need more here. It's a snippet we don't know how to feel about it. Need a mystery that allows us to flashback. So page 2, when we just got this tiny little snippet of him running through the jungle, I love that you're playing with mystery and you're doing these reveals, but there is kind of a fine line between confusion and mystery when there's just a bunch of, like, we're in a doctor's office. We don't know why he was looking out the window funny. He's talking about there's something I should tell you, and we're not sure what that means. And then he starts telling us about this guy running through the jungle. We're not really sure why he's running through the jungle. So it's a little too much. I don't know what's going on. It borders on confusion rather than mystery. So I would be careful about that. And again, if you start it with Sam and have him being captured, that would fix all that problem. And then now that I think about this too, be really careful. The very first scene also is the point of view of the doctor, which kind of confuses who the lead is in the story. Later on, there's a scene where Stella's upset that Sam is going to be drafted, and she goes into the other room and Claire follows her. Then all of a sudden the story becomes Stella's or even Claire's. It becomes her point of view. And then when we do a flashback from Stella's point of view, looking at the father, we really want to stay in one character's shoes. So be careful of these point of views that start to shift and go crazy. And I don't think we needed that the dad killed himself in the past and what happened in the past. I didn't really think that was necessary. The mom could have killed herself just because she was so upset about Sam leaving. So I would be really careful. Try to keep us in Sam's shoes the whole time and watch the point of view going outside of him. Then a few little things. Every once in a while, it got a little flowery and was more like a novel than a script. Also, be careful. You've always got to describe what we see on screen. So if you have something like Sam suddenly realizes that he forgot to turn the gas stove off and should really go home and turn it off. We as the reader, and that was a ridiculous example, but we as the reader have no idea what you see on screen. Do we see Sam having suddenly a strange look on his face when he remembers that he should turn the gas off? Or do we actually have a flash of the kitchen and the gas on the stove on? So be careful when you start to talk about what the character's thinking about. We as the reader have no idea what we're actually seeing on screen. Are we just seeing the character and we're just looking at them and we have no idea what the thoughts are in their head, or are we actually seeing the thoughts in their head? Here's an example of what I was talking about. Thoughts we cannot see on screen. We as the reader are totally confused. What does the film look like? And all we want to know is, what does the film look like? Thoughts of embarrassment over his absolute vulnerability rush through Sam as he reads her lips from afar. I don't know what thoughts of embarrassment look like. Are we just seeing him? Is he having flashbacks of embarrassment? So when we say thoughts of embarrassment rush through him, all we're seeing is him standing there, or we're seeing his face. We're not seeing thoughts of embarrassment. So we can't have what's in his head. Okay. I said, noticing dialogue feels a little formal and repetitive. So this is here, Claire, don't mention it really. Please don't ever mention this to anyone. This is what I was talking about when characters say the same thing again, either in the exact phrasing or subtly different. So she's basically saying the same thing. Don't mention it really. Really is not adding anything new. Please don't ever mention this to anyone. That's really saying the same thing. She could just say, please don't mention this to anyone. Then Sam says, thank you. Thank you. The same thing twice. So be careful. And then also we have Claire pounds on his chest over and over. Then Claire continued pounding harder. Breathe, damn it. And then she was already saying breathe. So a little too much the same words and dialogue. So just go through the whole script and cut out anything that's repetitive. And then later Sam says, thank you, thank you. So we get the same things twice. Let's see. Page 8 is where I started to really feel like I wasn't understanding Sam. So really out of the gate, I didn't know who he was when he was being saved and he was feeling things because he didn't have a goal, because he wasn't doing things, he wasn't active. So it was this early that I was starting to feel like I didn't know who Sam was. Okay. In same scene, Sam's living room, evening of the draft. Sam was incredibly passive in that scene and doing what Claire told him to do and feeling things. And we were watching characters worry. We kind of need to get out of their head. Page 9. Time to break reality and maybe time. This is where I knew on page 9, you had already kind of clued me in that there was a fantasy going to go on here, and it was trippy, and we were going to get flashbacks, and we were going to get what was going on in his mind versus reality. This is where I was feeling like, okay, if we're going to introduce those elements, those fantastic elements, those flashbacks, seeing what's in his mind versus reality, it needs to start now, because any later than this, or even just a little hint of it, we need to get now to establish the tone of what's to come. I already talked about page 11. We've kind of gone off the rails when we have a flashback. We're already in a flashback of a flashback from the point of view of a doctor. So that's where we are right now. We're the doctor's flashback of a flashback, and now we're going to go to Stella's point of view and then flashback. We've kind of gone a little crazy. Page 12, talk about the past isn't action in the now. This is something to be careful of too. Go through the entire script and see where our characters talking about something that happened in the past, because by default, by definition, any scene where characters are talking about something that happened in the past, there's nothing currently happening in the now. And it's okay if every once in a while there needs to be some talk of the past to make it, if it's relevant to what's going on now, but be careful and cut those scenes where we talk about the past. Page 13. We start to get really into like Stella's feelings and how she feels about it. Again, try to stay in Sam's shoes because it's getting too far out to other characters. Page 13, more characters talking about the past and feelings. We need to get a little more into action. This is where he asks her to marry him, and she says yes, which is a little straight line. So again, finding ways to create conflict and urgency and twists and turns and surprise. Page 15, Sam, you do realize that you are a grown man afraid to get a spanking from his mama, and so you enlisted to fight in a war. This is, again, where I didn't know that I understood Sam because his dialogue tended to be a little formal. And so I didn't know, was he raised in a prep school? Was he very studious? Is he very intelligent? I don't know, because normally somebody would say something like, oh, a grown man so scared of his mama he goes to war. And that's it. They wouldn't have so many words. So again, I don't know if I understand Sam. And again, I said page 20, still not sure who Sam is. He worries and he's passive and he's clumsy. Man 1, Freeman voiceover. Sam suddenly realized this was the first death he had seen since his father's. He also realized that in that hallway, that much more death was to come, maybe even his own. It was already there and staring him in the face. Again, all those voiceovers were just talking about how he felt about things, and I didn't think he really added to it, so I don't think we needed the voiceover. Page 25, Sam falls again. He seems a little too clumsy. I wouldn't want him to be in my unit. He needs to be a little more capable. So unless he is like a Mr. Magoo who's super, super klutzy and just like like kind of fumbles his way through life but always magically gets out of things. He was almost so klutzy I didn't know if he was like almost a Mr. Magoo. Page 26, Fade to Dream. He dreams of a pink balloon floating with total darkness around it, as if it is the only thing in the universe. This is where we start to change tone, where it becomes more fantastic, and page 26 is a little too long to do that. So I would encourage to at least have maybe a little snippet before that. Page 38. We already talked about this. He wasn't active enough in his own escape. He needs to escape through his own ingenuity, talent, and capabilities, as opposed to just kind of falling into it. Page 39, he passively does what the little girl tells him to do. Page 41, Tiger, he's passive. The girl's doing all the work to try to save him. I don't trust Sam. See, that's the problem. He seems so wimpy and so fearful and afraid. I don't trust scared people. Scared people will do desperate things. And when you're scared, they've actually shown scientifically, like, not all your brain is functioning. You're in the fight or flight. You've only got, so he kind of scares me, which makes it worse when he scares me when I think he's cuckoo. But when he's so scared and so passive and so fearful and nervous, I kind of don't want to even be around him. I'm like, ooh, he's a little scary. 58, accidentally shoots the rocket launcher at the guard with the grenade. He's not active enough. Again, things happen to him so through his own clumsiness and his own accidents. This is where I'm like, is he supposed to be like a Mr. Magoo where he's just like accidentally things happen all the time? Confused. Page 62 is where I felt that started to become a little bit repetitive. It was he and Lily running and they're chasing, and he and Lily running and they're chasing, and he and Lily running, they're chasing. So that needs to be mixed up a little bit. Here's also what I was thinking. We needed a little more development of the baddies, a little bit of shading. So even if it's one guard that he kind of bonds with who's a little nicer or shows some humanity, just to give us some relationships and some depth to that. Then Sam gets saved from a sniper. A U.S. sniper saves him. He doesn't have to do anything, so he didn't get it. Then I say here, when we know all along Lily doesn't exist, it's not so sad when she goes. So we can't, I want to be just as sad as he is when she goes, because then I would be even so much happier when she becomes real at the end. So I really kind of want to feel like she was real all along. And that, again, might mean grounding it a little bit more and not making it quite so fantastic as far as riding elephants or going to Mars, maybe grounding it just a little bit more. I mean, there still could be an elephant in there, because that would just be borderline. If that was the only fantastic thing, it's like we could kind of believe it and maybe it's true. But I would really like to be sad that we find out she's not real, because we come to love her so much. And then we would be even more loving at the end when she is real in some form as the real life Lily. Then on page 64, when we have him see the doctor that he saw the first week he was there, when he fell down and bumped his head, I got confused for a second that maybe all of this, him being a POW, him getting captured, was a dream. So that needs to be a little more clear, because I was like, wait a second, did he just imagine he was at the POW camp and that didn't even really happen? And then it took him being home and being a homeless person and being traumatized by what he went through. I was like, oh, he really did go through it. He really was a POW. Because otherwise, when he sees the first doctor he saw when he just bumped his head, I don't think you need the first bump on the head, because if he didn't dream all of this and he didn't just bump himself on the head and go cuckoo and pretend he was a POW and imagine it, then it just confuses things and took us longer to get to the main story of Lily. Then on page 69, he's running away from Claire. Again, it made him wimpy. The doctor says in the beginning, he's always been a runner. He always runs away from things. He just needs to be a little less runaway, wimpy, scared, and a little more solid. Page 71, green light before he hits people. The driver in the car, for me, could use some shading. So much of the script is really grounded, which I think helps, because it makes those poetic moments even more beautiful because we're in the story. He seemed a little too cartoony, the driver, and then he, throws the milkshake on Sam. I didn't think we need to follow him for a while to take the spotlight off of Sam. I thought just we could have the driver for a second and then throw the milkshake onto him. We didn't need to get to know the life of the driver and what's all about him and his passenger and everything. I thought that was the story felt like it was a little going off the rails and spiraling into too many directions towards the end and getting too many characters involved. So I would tighten it in. I would remove the driver. Page 79, long speech by doctor, dances around ideas, need more action. Sam's needs to be in the spotlight. That really long speech, again, because you're so good with the poetic, lyrical, nail it with a visual and a moment, that to me was getting a little too on the nose and too long and taking the spotlight away from Sam. Page 80, suddenly at the end, he's an artist when we didn't get that before. So again, it's that not understanding Sam. Suddenly he's an artist where we've spent this, we've spent almost an hour and a half with him and supposedly got flashbacks of all the pertinent information we need to understand the story, and we had no idea who was an artist. Page 84, not understanding the first scene and what the doctor was telling the couple, a little too confusing. It did get confusing as to far as why the couple was in the waiting room, or why we were in the waiting room. He was looking in the waiting room and then they were in there. And then again, I don't think you need the doctor. Page 85. I think this should be the final scene, Sam dying. There could be some flashbacks to Lily and Sam in the jungle, but everything after this was too on the nose and pushing home the point too much. Again, I thought, drop the mic and walk away. You nailed it. I think you nailed it when you could even go into fantasy at that point a little bit more. Like when he's dying, if he sees the balloon going up and then maybe he goes with Lily to Mars and things like that. And then let that kind of linger and then end on that moment. I thought everything after that was too much talking about it and actually deflated. It's like you hit it, nailed it. Everything after that kind of chipped away at that moment and had it disintegrate and fall apart and lost it. So I would cut and run on that. Then all the stuff after the credits I thought was too happy. It was like more happiness, more fun, more joy. And I think the death is a wonderful bittersweet moment. And I think you should keep that sweet and sour. It turned into like more sugar at the end. And I also got really, really confused when I know, he's dying, he's seeing death. And then later he's playing in a band with, Lily and Bo and Willie, who are also dead. Then I'm completely confused as to whose point of view we're seeing and what's reality and what's not reality. So I don't think the credit stuff helped you. I think it took away from that moment that you did so well, of the final moment when he dies and we realize Lily is real. That is beautiful. End with that and call it good. And everything after that was just kind of layering on too much. And then usually they don't do end credits at the end, and you certainly don't want to indicate, under what name comes what. Like nobody wants to read credits. So I just didn't think all that happiness at the end worked for you. I thought the bittersweet was gorgeous. It was the perfect flavor. It was the perfect ending, and it needed nothing else. And if you cut all that stuff that happened after the death and cut all the end credit stuff and cut the stuff of Stella going into the flashback of the past and the father and all that, if you cut that, because you can still have the stuff about the father, but if you kept the framing story, Sam in the POW camp, he can flash back and remember when his father died. And that can be from his point of view. We don't have to go to Stella's point of view, remembering the past. And then if you cut down him and Claire, and if you did have a framing device of him in the POW camp and then flashing back as he's telling someone else the story of how he got there, whatever, you can get it in there a little tighter and a little sooner. And if we cut all the redundant dialogue, then we've got plenty of space to then deepen maybe his relationship with Lily. Because right now he sees Lily and then boom, off they go running into the forest, and they're just running and here, go there, get on the elephant, let's go. And they're not interacting and having evolution, and I'm not getting to know her relationship with him. They're not having a relationship. So there's more space to kind of go deeper in these. And I think that would be beautiful. And I think the last moment is so wonderful. So those are some things to ponder and think about. But I absolutely love, I think you have your head on the right way to know that formatting is important, but not prioritize it at this point. I indicated, what should be changed, and then I attached an example of how you could do the montage thing. Although most of your montages actually weren't montages, they were just scenes that kind of went together to create a sequence, but they weren't really montages. Montages are very, very quick shots. They don't usually have too much dialogue in them. And then I will make sure that I address all the other questions that you had too in the email that I will attach to it as well. But thank you so much for letting me read. And I love how much passion you have for this. I love that the story is heartfelt. I can tell you're not writing this because you think, oh, I'm going to sell this action movie to people who like this kind of stuff for $1 million. Like, you have something to tell. You have a story to tell. You have vibrant ideas that live in your mind and characters that are springing to life in your mind, and you want to share those. So it comes across on the page that this is coming from passion. It's coming from heart. And that's a huge part of this, because it's easy to just fix up a script that has heart, but a script with no heart, you can't resuscitate it from the dead. There's nowhere to go. So you're starting with a big heart here and lots of yummy, juicy things. The homeless situation, gorgeous. Putting us in the shoes of homeless person. I love bringing in this fantasy element to it. Gorgeous. Bringing in this idea of, destiny and all these other kind of cosmic ideas. Beautiful. So I look forward to seeing where you go with this. Keep working on it and playing with it. And you've got, again, an incredible superpower here of creating those delicate, subtle, poetic, lyrical moments. So keep doing those. You have some major superpower there. Thank you for letting me read this. And those are my notes. Over and out.